They say your birthday should remind you how loved you are. Mine reminded me how alone I'd become. The dining room glowed with soft golden light. Candles flickered between the dishes, their flames trembling as if they sensed what was coming. I had worn my best cream dress, the one Aram had once called elegant like you, Amy. I wanted to believe he still meant it. The table was set for 8, though only 5 had shown up. I smiled anyway, I always do. My son sat at the head beside his wife, Nadia, her nails sharp red against the glass stem she kept swirling. Across from them, Aram's younger cousin scrolled through his phone, pretending not to notice the tension stretching between us. Birthdays used to mean laughter, family, small gifts wrapped in clumsy paper. But ever since Nadia entered our lives, it felt like every celebration came with a test, one I kept failing quietly. Amy, you didn't need to cook so much, Aram said. His tone was polite, practiced. Smiled. It's not a birthday without your favorite biryani. Nadia's lips twitched. Oh, I thought we agreed we'd order catering this year. Homemade food can be heavy. Her voice slid through the air like a blade wrapped in silk. The others laughed awkwardly, and I lowered my eyes to my plate. I had spent the whole morning cooking that biryani, just to see that smirk on her face. Still, I told myself, don't ruin the evening. I had one wish this year, to have peace, even if it was only for an hour. When dessert arrived, I stood to thank them. I'm grateful you all came, I began softly. It means more than you know. My voice trembled slightly. After your father passed, A sound cut through my words, the scrape of Nadia's chair. She rose slowly, holding her wine glass. To new beginnings, she said, smiling coldly. And old endings. Before I could understand what she meant, she tilted her wrist. The red wine cascaded through the air, landing squarely across my chest. The gasp that followed was sharp enough to slice through my heart. The liquid burned cold, trickling down the front of my dress like blood. Froze. My hands trembled at my sides. The table fell silent except for the soft hum of the ceiling fan above. For one wild second I thought it was an accident. But Nadia's eyes told me otherwise. She looked me up and down, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. There, she said. Now you look as cheap as you are. Something inside me cracked. Aram's fork clinked against his plate, but he didn't say a word. He didn't even look at me. He just stared at the stain spreading across the tablecloth, as if the pattern fascinated him. Aram, I whispered. My throat felt tight. Say something. He exhaled long and heavy. It's just wine, Amy. Don't make it dramatic. That sentence, that one sentence, burned worse than the wine itself. I could hear my own heartbeat, deafening in my ears. My cousin shifted uncomfortably, murmuring, maybe we should, but Nadia cut him off with a glare. I stood there for what felt like years, my cream dress clinging to my skin, my dignity dripping to the floor with every red drop. Finally I forced a smile. Of course. You're right. It's just wine. I reached for my napkin, dabbed uselessly at the stain, and set the napkin neatly back on the table. My hands were steady, but my heart wasn't. Nadia laughed softly. You might want to use baking soda for that. Or just throw it away. The way she said throw it away made it clear she wasn't talking about the dress. No one defended me. Not my son, not the cousin, not even the maid who had frozen in the corner. It was as if I'd disappeared from the room entirely. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders and said, "Thank you for dinner." "Are you leaving already?" Nadia asked, pretending surprise. We were just about to cut the cake. Her cruelty had no edges. It was smooth, deliberate, rehearsed. I looked at Aram one last time. "You didn't even wish me," I said quietly. He finally met my eyes and for a brief second I saw something. Guilt, maybe? But it vanished just as quickly. "Happy birthday, Amy," he said flatly. He nodded. "Thank you." Then I turned away before the tears could betray me. The hallway to the door felt longer than ever. My heels clicked softly against the marble, echoing like reminders of every sacrifice I'd made for him. The nights I stayed up sewing his uniforms, the times I sold my jewelry for his tuition, the day I handed him his father's ring. And now, he couldn't even protect me from humiliation at my own table. Outside, the air was cool, the night quiet. I could still hear faint laughter behind the closed door. My reflection in the car window looked like a stranger, wine-stained, broken, older than I'd felt just hours ago. As I sat in the driver's seat, my hands shook around the steering wheel. I kept seeing her face, her smirk, her satisfaction. I could have screamed. I could have driven away and never looked back. But I didn't. I sat there in silence until the laughter inside turned to music again. Then, slowly I started the car. Each turn of the engine felt like a heartbeat returning. As the house lights faded in the rearview mirror, a strange thought came to me. Maybe she was right. Maybe I did look cheap, desperate, pitiful. But if she wanted to break me, she'd have to try harder. Because I wasn't done yet. I reached the edge of the driveway and stopped. My dress was ruined, my pride bruised, but something else flickered to life inside me. Not anger, not even revenge. It was something colder. Resolve. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that waits. When I finally drove off into the night, I whispered to myself, "You'll regret that, Nadia. One day, you'll regret every drop." And deep down I already knew. That night wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something I didn't yet understand. Something that would make her wish she'd never poured that wine. I thought a little soap could erase the shame. But no matter how hard I scrubbed, the red only spread deeper, like it wanted to stay. The bathroom smelled of detergent and bitterness. I stood over the sink, sleeves rolled up, rubbing the fabric again and again, watching the water turn pink. The sound of the faucet filled the silence that my son left behind. I had been waiting for his call. Every vibration of my phone made my heart jump. But it was never him. Not even a text. Not even a "sorry, Amy." I twisted the wet dress in my hands, the cream fabric now dull and ruined. The wine had soaked too deep, clinging to the fibers the way Nadia's words clung to my mind. "Now you look as cheap as you are." They echoed every time I closed my eyes. I dropped the dress into the bucket and sat on the cold tile floor. For a long moment I just stared at the water. The stain floated like a ghost, crimson, spreading, impossible to ignore. That was the night it finally hit me. I wasn't welcome in my own son's home anymore. The thought burned worse than humiliation. I raised him better than this. I taught him respect, kindness, gratitude. All the things he now reserves for strangers while I get his silence. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe I made him too soft, too easily swayed. When his father died, I did everything. Managed the house, paid his fees, sold my jewelry, even borrowed money quietly so he wouldn't feel the weight of our struggle. He promised he'd never forget. And yet here I was, scrubbing a dress like a beggar trying to clean off dignity that someone else destroyed. The clock struck midnight. Another birthday gone. Another reminder that life doesn't always repay love with love. I looked around my small kitchen, chipped tiles, an old fridge humming softly, the same faded curtains I'd hung years ago. Everything here held memories of family dinners, laughter, Aram's childhood. His tiny hands reaching for me, his voice calling, "Amy, I'm hungry." Those echoes made the silence tonight feel even heavier. The phone sat on the counter, dark and still. Picked it up, opened our old chat. The last message from him was 2 weeks ago. "Aram, can you transfer 15,000 by tomorrow? Nadia wants to get something." And I did. Without a question. Without hesitation. Now, I'd give anything just to hear him ask again. The floor felt cold against my bare feet. I poured another cup of water over the stain, watching it bleed into the bucket like a wound refusing to close. I whispered to the fabric, "Why won't you let go?" But I wasn't talking about the wine anymore. I was talking about the pain, the humiliation, the way Nadia's laughter kept looping in my head, that triumphant curve of her lips as she watched me freeze in front of everyone. The tears came quietly this time, the kind that don't shake the body, just slide down unnoticed. I thought of calling him again, but what would I say? Your wife insulted me and you did nothing. He'd only tell me I was being dramatic. He always says that now. Once he used to bring me flowers every birthday. Yellow roses, my favorite. Now I was alone with a ruined dress and a bucket of pink water. I stood up, picked the dress out, and hung it on the line. The fabric dripped steadily, one red drop after another, like the house itself was crying. The moonlight hit the wet cloth, turning it darker, heavier. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. Somewhere deep inside, a part of me hardened, not in anger but in resignation. Maybe this was who I was now, a mother who gave everything and received silence. The phone buzzed suddenly. My heart jumped, but it was just a notification, a bank message. Balance: 1,213 rupees. I laughed bitterly. Perfect birthday gift. The sound of my own voice startled me. It sounded old, cracked, foreign. I didn't even recognize the woman speaking. I walked to my bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the empty wall where my husband's photo once hung. I had taken it down a few months after Aram's wedding. Nadia said it made the living room look too sentimental. Now I wished I'd never listened. The air smelled faintly of detergent and loneliness. I lay back slowly, staring at the ceiling fan spinning shadows across the room. The hum was hypnotic, the kind of sound that fills your head when you're trying not to think. But I couldn't stop thinking. About Aram's eyes avoiding mine. About Nadia's cruel smile. About the wine that refused to wash out. It wasn't just a dress she stained. It was everything I had built, every ounce of love I'd poured into that family. I turned on my side, clutching the pillow as though it could hold me back together. My voice came out as a whisper, trembling in the dark. What did I ever do to deserve this? The question hung in the air, unanswered, and the silence that followed was colder than the night itself. They say a house remembers the hands that built it. Mine remembers mine, and how they trembled the day I handed over the keys. It was the day Aram got married. The house smelled of roses and mendi, walls echoing with laughter. I still remember his face, proud, nervous, glowing. I pressed the cold keys into his palm, kissed his forehead and said, "It's yours now, beta. Build your own memories here." I thought I was giving him love. Instead, I gave away my only kingdom. Now when I visit, the house feels different, like it doesn't know me anymore. The curtains I stitched myself are gone, replaced by white linen ones that make the rooms look cold and empty. The photo frames that once held our family pictures now carry Nadia's smiling face, her parents, her friends, her vacations. Every corner that once whispered home now echoes her perfume. I tell myself not to mind it. She's young, modern, maybe just trying to make her own space. But sometimes when I see her rearrange the furniture or roll her eyes at my old things, I feel like a ghost haunting a place that used to belong to me. Today, I came by to drop off a box of mangoes, Aram's favorite since childhood. I stood at the gate for 10 minutes before ringing the bell. I could hear voices inside. Laughter, the sound of spoons clinking against plates. When Nadia opened the door, her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, it's you," she said flatly. "I brought mangoes," I said, holding up the box like a peace offering. She sighed. "You could have just sent them with the driver." "I don't have a driver." "Right," she said with a faint smirk. "Forgot." I ignored it and stepped inside. The living room was unrecognizable, modern furniture, glass tables, abstract art. My husband's old armchair, the one he used to read in every evening, was gone. "Where's your Abba's chair?" I asked softly. "Oh, that old thing. We sold it." "It didn't match the decor," she replied, already turning away. "Sold it. Just like that." For her it was just furniture. For me it was 30 years of evenings, laughter and shared tea. I sat down quietly, pretending to admire the room. Aram came out of the kitchen, smiling, distracted. "Amy, you came." He hugged me, quick and light, the kind of hug people give when they're in a hurry. Smiled back. "How are you?" "Busy as always," he said, glancing at his watch. We have some guests coming. Maybe you can come another day. I won't stay long, I promised. Nadia appeared again, arranging cushions that didn't need arranging. Actually, Aram, the caterer is coming soon. We need to finalize the menu. He nodded quickly. Yes, right. She didn't even need to say it. Her tone already made it clear. I wasn't wanted. I placed the mango box on the table and stood up. I'll go then, I said quietly. Aram looked torn for a moment, then forced a smile. Don't go yet, Amy. Have tea. But Nadia's voice sliced through. We're actually out of tea leaves. A lie. I could see the tea set on the counter. I nodded, forcing a smile. It's all right. Another time. On my way out, I passed the hallway mirror. For a second, I didn't recognize the woman in the reflection. Her eyes looked tired, her posture slightly bent. Her face lined with years of love that no one seemed to remember. Outside, the sun was blazing, but I felt cold. As I walked down the driveway, I thought about how that house once felt alive. The laughter of my son, the hum of my husband's old songs, the smell of jasmine in the garden. Now it was all gone, painted over in shades of silence and arrogance. I had built that home brick by brick with my husband. Every decision, every corner, every tile, chosen with love. We wanted Aram to grow up surrounded by warmth. And now, the woman who shared none of that history walked through it like a queen. Still I stayed silent, because I told myself, silence is dignity. When people insult you once, you can defend yourself. But when they insult you slowly, every day with little gestures and smiles, you start doubting your right to even fight back. As I reached the gate, I heard laughter from the living room. Nadia's voice. I hesitated. Something made me stop. I turned slightly, just enough to see through the open window. She was sitting on the sofa, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was casual, amused. No, she just left. Yes, that woman still shows up sometimes. I think she's too poor to move out completely. The words hit me harder than the wine ever did. Too poor to move out. My throat tightened. I wanted to shout, to tell her this was my house first, my money, my memories. But I didn't move. I stood there, frozen, invisible, listening to her laughter echo through the home I built, the home I no longer belonged to. Finally I turned away, my heart heavy but strangely calm. Because for the first time I realized something. I wasn't poor. I was just surrounded by people too small to understand the value of what I'd given them. But her words stayed with me all the way home, burning quietly in my chest. Too poor to move out. I whispered to myself. We'll see about that. I never thought I'd need permission to see my own son. But that's what it's come to, waiting outside my own house like an unwelcome guest. It had been 3 days since I overheard Nadia's cruel words. Too poor to move out. They replayed in my mind every night, cutting deeper than any argument ever could. I told myself to forget, to forgive, to be the bigger person. So, I ironed my plain cotton dupatta, packed a small box of homemade kebabs, and decided to visit again, pretending nothing had happened. Maybe if I smiled enough, if I stayed calm, things would return to normal. But when I reached the house, the air felt heavy. The curtains were drawn, the garden unkempt, the sound of laughter absent. I rang the bell, heart beating faster than it should. The door opened. Nadia stood there, perfectly dressed as always, phone in hand, expression unreadable. Oh, she said, glancing behind her. You again. I swallowed my pride. I brought dinner. Thought I'd help out. Her hand stayed on the door. She didn't move. We're busy, she said flatly. My eyes darted past her, and there he was, Aram, standing in the hallway. My son. For a moment everything froze. His eyes met mine, then slipped away like he couldn't bear to look too long. Aram, I whispered. Won't you say hello? He rubbed the back of his neck. Amy, it's not a good time right now. Something cracked inside me, but I didn't let it show. My hands trembled, but I kept my smile. That's all right. I understand. Nadia shifted, ready to close the door. Good. Maybe next week. The door clicked shut before I could even say goodbye. I stood there for a long time, staring at the wood grain of the door, pretending the sting in my eyes was just the dust. The box of kebabs felt heavy in my hands. I left it on the doorstep and walked away slowly, each step heavier than the last. On the road back home I couldn't stop thinking, where did I go wrong? I raised my son to be kind, respectful, grateful. I never imagined that one day I'd become a burden, a shadow to hide behind locked doors. When I reached my small apartment, the silence felt cruel. The clock ticked too loud, the walls too empty. I changed into my night clothes, heated a cup of milk, and sat before my husband's framed photo, the one that's been on the mantel since the day he passed. He was smiling in that picture, wearing the same kurta he had on when we signed the papers for our family home. I remember how proud he was. "This is for them," he'd said. "For you and Aram." I touched the edge of the frame and whispered, "Would you be proud of the woman I've become?" The room didn't answer. Only the faint hum of the ceiling fan. "I stayed silent just like you taught me," I continued. "I didn't raise my voice. I didn't fight. But maybe silence isn't dignity anymore. Maybe it's just surrender." I felt the tears before I realized I was crying. I laughed softly through them, a strange, broken sound. Look at me, talking to a photograph like some madwoman. But in that quiet night, I felt his presence. Or maybe it was just memory, the ghost of a voice that used to tell me I was strong. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but the images kept coming. The door closing in my face, Aram's averted eyes, Nadia's cold tone. I kept wondering if I'd raised him wrong, if I'd given too much love, made him too dependent, too soft for a world that rewarded selfishness. Sometime past midnight, I gave up on sleep and sat by the window. The streetlights painted long shadows on the floor, stretching toward the photo of my husband like reaching hands. I whispered, "If you were here, this wouldn't be happening. You'd never let them treat me like this." A gust of wind rattled the window pane, soft, hollow, lonely. I thought about how strange it was, to give birth to someone who eventually forgets the sound of your pain. To raise a child who once clung to your sorry, now unwilling to meet your eyes. The forgotten mother. That's what I'd become. Somewhere in that silence, I made a quiet promise to myself. I won't beg for love anymore. I'll stop visiting places that no longer have space for me. Just as I whispered those words, my phone buzzed on the table. The sound startled me, sharp and unexpected in the stillness. The screen glowed with an unfamiliar number. For a second I hesitated, then answered. "Mrs. Rahman." Deep male voice. "Yes, who's speaking?" "This is Mr. Qureshi, your late husband's lawyer. I've been trying to reach you. There's something important we need to discuss. It concerns your property." My heart skipped. "My property?" "Yes," he said firmly. "It's about your husband's estate. You might want to come in tomorrow." Before I could ask more, the line went dead. I sat there in the dark, staring at the silent phone, pulse pounding in my throat. Something had shifted, quietly, powerfully. For the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I didn't sleep that night. How could I, after hearing those words? "It concerns your property." They echoed in my mind like a secret waiting to explode. By dawn, I was sitting on the edge of my bed, fully dressed, the lawyer's number still glowing on my phone screen. I didn't even know what I hoped for. Maybe it was closure. Maybe justice. Or maybe, just maybe, a sign that I hadn't been forgotten after all. The city was still waking up when I reached Mr. Qureshi's office. The building smelled faintly of dust and old paper, the kind of place where the past never really dies, just sleeps in drawers and sealed envelopes. He was waiting for me in a small room lined with bookshelves. An elderly man now, with kind eyes and a voice that carried the weight of too many secrets. "Mrs. Rahim," he said, standing to greet me. "It's been a long time." I nodded politely, clutching my purse. "You said it was important." He gestured for me to sit. Papers were spread across his desk. Legal files, yellowed folders, a single sealed envelope resting on top. "Yes," he said slowly, choosing his words with care. "Your late husband left something for you. It was meant to be delivered only under certain circumstances." I frowned. Certain circumstances. He met my eyes. "If you ever came to me, asking about your son or your home." My breath caught. "My home." He nodded and pushed the envelope toward me. "This letter has been waiting here for 8 years. Years. That was the year my husband died. The year everything changed." My fingers shook as I reached for it. The envelope was heavy, the paper slightly yellowed. His familiar handwriting still strong on the front. "For Aisha, if she ever forgets her worth." I felt the tears before I even opened it. Inside was a folded note, written in the same slanted handwriting I'd memorized over 30 years of marriage, and a document clipped behind it. I unfolded the letter carefully. "My dearest Aisha, if you are reading this, it means life has tested you again. And if I know you, you've met it with silence. The same silence that made me fall in love with you, and the same silence that sometimes broke my heart. You gave everything to our son. You gave him love, home, pride. But I fear he might one day forget who built the ground beneath his feet. That's why I made sure you could never be erased from it." Pause. My hands trembled as I turned the page, heart pounding. "The house, our home, remains in your name. I never transferred it, no matter what I told Aram. I wanted him to learn responsibility, not ownership. If they ever make you feel like you don't belong, remember, you are the foundation of everything they have. And foundations don't ask for permission to exist. With all my love, Rahim." For a long moment I couldn't breathe. The room blurred through tears I didn't even feel falling. I looked up at Mr. Qureshi, my voice breaking. He never told me." The lawyer's expression softened. "He wanted to protect you, Mrs. Rahim. He knew his son might be easily influenced after his passing. He trusted me to keep this safe, until you needed it." He slid the second document toward me. Official papers, crisp despite their age. My name printed clearly at the top in bold, black ink. Owner, Aisha Rahim. I stared at it, unable to move. It felt unreal, like waking from a nightmare and realizing the light had been on all along. I whispered, "You mean it's still mine?" Mr. Qureshi nodded. "Legally, yes. You still own everything, Mrs. Rahim. Everything." The word rang in my ears. Heavy, powerful, almost dangerous. For months, I'd been treated like a ghost in that house. Like someone who overstayed her welcome in a place she'd built brick by brick. And now, with a single sheet of paper, everything shifted. I held the letter close to my chest. My husband's words felt like a heartbeat beneath my fingers. Steady, protective, alive even after all these years. The silence in the room felt different now. Not empty, but full of meaning. Mr. Qureshi spoke gently. "You can reclaim your property whenever you wish. But I'd advise caution. Family matters are delicate." I smiled faintly through my tears. "You're right. They are delicate. But some lessons need to be learned." As I left his office, the morning sun was brighter than it had been in months. The city noise didn't bother me. Even the honking cars felt like background music to something bigger, something waiting to begin. I stopped at a small cafe across the street, ordered tea, and spread the papers on the table. My reflection stared back at me in the glass window. Older, yes, but no longer powerless. For years I'd been told to stay quiet, to be patient, to endure. But patience had its limits. And maybe my silence wasn't dignity anymore. Maybe it was time to speak. I thought of Aram's face, the way he looked through me that day at the door. I thought of Nadia's voice, sharp and cruel, calling me cheap. I traced my name on the document slowly, almost reverently. Aisha Rahim. Owner. Mother. Widow. Forgotten woman. No longer. The sky outside shifted to gold as the sun rose higher. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it inside my purse, close to my heart. Quiet strength filled me. Not anger, not revenge. Just clarity. I paid for my tea, stood, and walked toward the street where my house waited, the one they thought wasn't mine anymore. But as I reached for my phone to call Aram, something inside me whispered, "Not yet. They don't know what you know. Not yet." And for the first time in a long time I smiled. A small, knowing smile that even surprised me. 'Cause I finally understood what power felt like. It wasn't in shouting or fighting. It was in silence, when silence carried truth. Sometimes silence can scream louder than words. That night mine was a roar. After reading my husband's letter, I didn't sleep again. But this time it wasn't grief that kept me awake. It was something sharper, steadier. The kind of calm that comes right before a storm. By morning I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to wait for them to call. I was going to visit. Unannounced. I dressed carefully. A soft beige shawl, a neat bun, my late husband's gold bangle around my wrist. The same one I'd worn when I handed Aram the house keys years ago. Today those keys felt different. Today they belonged to me again. When I reached the gate I stood still for a moment. The paint had chipped since I last came. The flowers I once planted were gone. The brass nameplate, Rahim Residence, was dull, half covered in dust. I rang the bell. Nadia opened the door. Her smile froze mid-air when she saw me. She looked me up and down, as if checking whether I'd finally learned my place. "Amy, what a surprise," she said, her tone sugared with annoyance. "Yes," I replied softly. "I thought I'd visit my family." Her brows twitched. For a second she didn't move. Then she stepped aside, forcing a smile. "Of course. Come in." Inside, everything felt unfamiliar. The curtains I'd chosen were gone, replaced with cold gray ones. The scent of jasmine, my favorite, had been drowned by something artificial, sharp. Even the walls seemed to hold their breath. Aram appeared from the living room, still in his work clothes. "Amy, you should have told us you were coming." I smiled faintly. "I wanted to surprise you." He hesitated, then hugged me half-heartedly. His shoulders felt tense, as if even affection had become a burden. Nadia's voice cut through the air. "We were just about to have dinner. Join us." He nodded. "I'd love to." The dining table looked different too. New plates, new chairs, no trace of the home I once built. I sat quietly, letting them play hosts in the house they thought was theirs. Nadia poured the wine. The same brand she had thrown at me on my birthday. The same deep red that had once stained my cream dress. I looked at the glass, then at her. "No, thank you," I said calmly. Her smile thinned. "Oh, still upset about that little accident?" I met her gaze steady. "Accidents don't leave stains that deep." For a brief moment, silence wrapped around the table. Even Aram looked away. Dinner continued awkwardly. Nadia talked endlessly about her renovation plans, her new furniture, her vision for a modern home. Every word was like a blade. But I didn't flinch. I just listened. When she mentioned breaking down the old study, my husband's favorite room, something inside me snapped. Not in anger but in clarity. "That's quite a change," I said quietly. "I remember he loved that room." "Oh yes," she replied casually, sipping her wine. "But it's outdated. We're turning it into a guest lounge. I want this house to finally reflect us." Smiled. A slow, patient smile that made her falter for just a second. "Us," I repeated softly. "That's an interesting word." Nadia blinked. "Well, it's our home after all." Aram didn't say a word. He was focused on his plate, pretending not to hear. I leaned back, folded my napkin neatly, and reached into my bag. My heart was calm, frighteningly calm. My husband's letter brushed against my fingertips, warm from being held all day. I took out the envelope and placed it gently on the table. Nadia frowned. "What's that?" "Something your father-in-law left behind," I said. Her eyes flicked to Aram, confused. "What do you mean?" I slid the folded document toward her. The crisp sound of paper slicing through tension. She hesitated before opening it. Her smirk returned halfway through reading, then vanished completely. Her voice cracked. This can't be right. Aram looked up finally, his face pale. What's going on? I met his eyes. The same eyes I'd once wiped tears from as a child, now filled with guilt he couldn't name. This, I said quietly, tapping the document, is the original property deed. Your father never transferred ownership. Nadia's lips parted, her face draining of color. I continued, voice low but steady. You've been living in my house, renovating my walls, sitting at my table. The air around us thickened. Even the clock seemed to stop ticking. Amy, Aram began, his tone pleading. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I wanted to believe you'd remember who built this home, I said, eyes glistening. But now I see. You needed a reminder. Nadia pushed the paper away, her voice sharp. This doesn't change anything. You can't just show up and... I interrupted her gently, but firmly. I'm not asking for permission, Nadia. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I rose slowly, every movement deliberate. Years of humiliation, swallowed pride, and silent suffering gathered behind my voice. I looked at her directly, my tone calm, almost kind. You're renovating my house. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Aram's fork clattered against his plate. Nadia froze, her face flushed with a mix of fear and disbelief. For once, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. Felt seen. The wine glass trembled in Nadia's hand, a flash of red threatening to spill again, but this time she didn't dare move. I turned toward the door, shawl slipping slightly off my shoulder, but I didn't stop to fix it. Behind me I could hear her whisper, voice breaking. What does she mean, Aram? Tell me she's bluffing. But Aram didn't answer. And as I stepped outside into the cool night air, I felt the wind shift. Soft, certain, freeing. It's strange how silence can hurt more than shouting. That night my silence was the loudest thing in the room. Aram's face went pale the moment my words sank in. You're renovating my house. Nadia blinked, as if her brain refused to process the sentence. Then her lips curled into a shaky smirk, one that didn't reach her eyes. You're lying, she hissed. I didn't move. I didn't need to. The truth was already spreading through the room like a slow fire. Aram looked between us, his voice trembling. Amy, is this true? You still own the house. I placed the folded document gently in front of him. Your father made sure of it. He scanned the papers with shaking hands, his lips parting wordlessly. I could see guilt forming in his eyes, layer by layer, as realization struck him. Nadia, however, wasn't looking at the document. She was looking at me, with eyes that could burn through walls. You waited until now to do this, she snapped. You think this makes you powerful. You're just trying to ruin our lives. I spoke softly. No, Nadia. I'm trying to remind you whose life this house was built on. She let out a bitter laugh. You've lost your mind. All these years living off your husband's pity, and now you're waving papers like a weapon. Her words were sharp, but they didn't pierce me. I had been stabbed too many times by silence to feel pain from noise. I stood up slowly, pushing my chair back. I don't need to prove anything. The truth already exists, whether you accept it or not. Aram reached out, his voice small. Nadia, stop. But she was already trembling with rage. No, Aram. She's trying to destroy everything we've built. Can't you see? She wants us out. The irony almost made me laugh. Everything they built. It was my walls, my floors, my husband's legacy, and my love that had carried them this far. I want peace, I said quietly. But if you continue treating me like an outsider, maybe leaving would be best. For you. Her eyes widened. You can't threaten me. I didn't reply. I simply gathered the papers, folded them neatly, and slipped them back into my bag. The air felt heavier now, charged with something dangerous. Aram stood there, torn between us, looking like a little boy again. Amy, please. Let's talk tomorrow. Nadia's just upset. I turned to him, my voice trembling with something that wasn't anger, but heartbreak. Tomorrow. You've been saying that for years. For a second he had no words. His silence said everything. Nadia pushed her chair back sharply, the legs screeching against the tiles. I'm done with this drama. She stormed out of the room, her heels clicking like gunshots down the hallway. The door slammed behind her, the echo lingering like an accusation. Aram followed, but not before glancing back at me, eyes full of confusion, guilt, and something that almost looked like shame. When the door shut again, I finally exhaled. My hands were trembling, but I felt lighter. The kind of lightness that comes after you've finally stopped pretending. I sat back down at the table, my untouched food now cold, the wine glass still glinting red in the dim light. For the first time in years, the house was quiet. But it wasn't peace. It was the silence before a storm. That night, I returned to my small apartment. The one-bedroom place I'd moved into after Nadia told me there wasn't enough space for me anymore. I never complained. I thought I was doing the right thing, giving them their freedom. But tonight, freedom felt different. It felt like reclaiming something that was stolen while I watched. I placed my bag on the table and took out the letter. My husband's words, the only voice that still comforted me. I read them again, slower this time. If they ever make you feel like you don't belong, remember. You are the foundation of everything they have. Tears rolled down my cheeks before I realized I was crying. But I wasn't sad. I was awake. My phone buzzed suddenly, breaking the stillness. Message. From Nadia. I hesitated before opening it. My fingers hovered over the screen, heart pounding as if I already knew what waited inside. Nadia, you'll regret this. The words felt like venom. Cold. Dark. Predictable. I didn't reply. Instead, I locked the phone and turned off the light. The apartment sank into darkness. Outside, the city hummed faintly. Cars passing, dogs barking, life continuing as if mine hadn't just cracked open. I lay down, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. A single thought echoed in my mind. Regret? I had lived in regret for years. For trusting too much, loving too deeply, staying too quiet. Well, this time, I wouldn't be the one regretting anything. It must have been past midnight when I heard it. Sharp crack. Shatter. The window exploded inward, a stone flying through the glass, scattering shards across the floor. I sat up instantly, heart racing. My reflection shattered in 1,000 pieces across the wall. The wind rushed through the broken pane, carrying the faint sound of a car speeding away. On the floor, beside the stone, was a scrap of paper wrapped around it. No words, just silence. But I didn't need to read it to understand. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. I woke up to the sound of defiance, a hiss of air escaping from something dying. First I thought it was a dream. Then I looked outside. All 4 tires. Flashed clean. The car sat crooked, helpless, like a wounded animal bleeding on the curb. For a moment I just stared, my breath misting the cold morning air. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't tremble. I only felt calm. Because I already knew who had done it. Nadia's message still glowed in my mind. You'll regret this. This was her idea of a warning. I walked closer, the crunch of glass under my shoes echoing in the empty street. The slashes were deep, deliberate, almost artistic in their cruelty. She wanted me to be scared. Back down. But instead I felt something rise inside me, something old and buried. It wasn't rage. It was clarity. I had spent years shrinking myself to keep peace. I had endured insults, manipulations, and quiet erasures, all in the name of family. And for what? So my kindness could be mistaken for weakness. No more. I didn't call the police. What good would it do? They'd write a report, file it away, and tell me to stay vigilant. But I had my own kind of vigilance now. One that didn't need sirens. Only patience. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing the same gray shawl my husband once said made me look stronger than I realized. I smiled at the memory. He always believed in my strength, even when I had forgotten it myself. I took a rickshaw to the lawyer's office. The city around me moved in slow motion, vendors shouting, horns blaring, children running to school. Life looked the same, but mine had shifted overnight. When I entered Mr. Karim's office, he looked up from his papers, surprised to see me again so soon. "Mrs. Rahim," he said gently, "I wasn't expecting you today." I placed my bag on his desk, my tone even. "I need to know how to evict someone from my property." His brows furrowed. "I see." He paused, studying my face. "Are you sure about this?" He nodded. "I've never been more sure." He adjusted his glasses, reaching for a pen. "It's your legal right. If the ownership is under your name, you can serve them an eviction notice. They'll have 30 days to leave." 30 days, I repeated quietly, as if testing the weight of those words. He looked at me carefully. "You understand this will escalate things. Are you prepared for that?" I smiled faintly. "They've already escalated it." He began drafting the documents. The sound of his pen scratching across paper felt strangely powerful. Each line was steady, deliberate, the kind of precision I used to admire in my husband when he signed business contracts. Now those same motions were mine. "Do you want me to deliver it personally?" Mr. Karim asked. "Or by registered courier?" I thought about Nadia's smirk, her laughter echoing in the house that was built from my sacrifices. "By courier," I said. "Let her open it with her morning tea." He chuckled softly, not mockingly, respectfully. "Understood." As he continued writing, I drifted into thought. I remembered the nights when Aram used to sleep on my lap as a child. The small, warm weight of him, the way he'd clutch my wrist and mumble, "Don't go anywhere, Ammi." Now he lived in my house, under another woman's rules. It wasn't hatred I felt, it was mourning. For the version of my son who used to know love without control, and for the version of myself who used to accept silence as peace. When the paperwork was done, Mr. Karim handed me a pen. "You'll need to sign here," he said. I hesitated for a moment. Signing that paper meant crossing a line I could never uncross. But then I thought of my husband's letter. "You are the foundation of everything they have." I pressed the pen to the paper and signed my name with a steady hand. For the first time in years, my name carried weight again. Mr. Karim looked up and smiled faintly. "It's done." I exhaled slowly. "So what happens next?" He leaned back in his chair. "Once they receive the notice, they have 30 days to vacate. After that, we can involve the court if needed." 30 days. 30 days for them to understand that I wasn't the frightened widow they thought I was. As I stood to leave, he added quietly, "You know, not many women do this. Most choose silence." I looked at him, my expression unreadable. I've lived in silence long enough. Outside, the afternoon sun was sharp, cutting through the dusty air. I walked past my broken car, past the neighborhood children who stared at me with curious eyes. Every step felt deliberate, like I was reclaiming the ground beneath my feet. That night, as I sat by my broken window, still unrepaired, I heard the city hum again. The same wind that once carried fear now carried purpose. I poured myself a cup of tea, steadying my hands against the warmth. On the table lay the copy of the eviction notice, folded neatly beside my husband's letter. For the first time, those two pieces of paper looked like a promise, one from the past, one for the future. And as I looked out at the darkness beyond the shattered glass, I whispered to myself, "They wanted war. I'll give them consequence." The sound of humiliation travels faster than any wind. By noon, half the neighborhood already knew. The eviction notice had been delivered in the middle of Nadia's precious ladies' luncheon, the kind where laughter was forced, jewelry was loud, and gossip was served before dessert. I wasn't there, of course. I didn't need to be. The phone calls started before the ink on her notice had even dried, and I could imagine the scene clearly. Her perfect table, set with imported dishes. Her guests sipping on expensive wine. And then a knock at the door. The courier handing her the envelope. The way her smile must have cracked as she tore it open, reading my name at the bottom of that page. For once, the silence in that house wouldn't be mine. It would be hers. By the time Aram called me, his voice was trembling. "Amy, what is this? What have you done?" I was sitting by the window, sewing the hem of a curtain that had long been ignored. My hands didn't stop moving as I answered. "I only reclaimed what was already mine." He exhaled sharply. "You could have spoken to me first." "I tried," I said quietly. "Many times. But your wife speaks louder than your conscience." There was a pause. Hollow one. The kind that used to be filled with love. "She's upset," he said finally. "You embarrassed her." I smiled faintly. "No, Aram. She embarrassed herself." Later that day, I received another call, this time from Mrs. Khan, one of Nadia's closest friends and the self-proclaimed queen of gossip. "Oh, my dear," she began, pretending sympathy she didn't feel. "We just heard what happened. Poor Nadia, she didn't deserve such humiliation." Her tone made my blood run cold. "She didn't deserve humiliation," I asked softly. "Or accountability." Mrs. Khan hesitated, then laughed nervously. "You know how these things go. Women can be emotional." Cut the call. I had no time for pity born of privilege. Because what none of them knew yet, what even Aram hadn't realized, was that Nadia's greed had been quietly bleeding him dry for months. 2 days later, Aram showed up at my doorstep. He looked thinner, the skin under his eyes bruised with exhaustion. "Can I come in?" he asked. For a second I wanted to say no, to let him taste rejection the way I had. But he was still my son. My door, like my heart, never stayed closed to him for long. He sat down in the living room, rubbing his forehead. "I checked the accounts, Amy. You were right. She's been transferring money into her own name. And lying about the renovations." My chest tightened, not with victory but sorrow. "What did you expect, Aram?" I whispered. "When you hand over everything to someone who only knows how to take." He looked up, eyes glassy. "I thought she loved me." "So did I," I said quietly. Hours later, I heard shouting from the house I once called mine. Nadia's voice cut through the air like glass shattering. "You think she's innocent," she screamed. "That old woman turned you against me." Aram's reply was hoarse, distant. "You turned me against myself." I didn't watch. I didn't need to. But I could hear the storm collapsing from across the garden. Furniture scraping, footsteps pounding, a door slamming hard enough to rattle the windows. For the first time, that house sounded alive again. Not with love, but with truth. The next morning I went there. The air was thick, tense, like the calm after a fire. Nadia stood in the living room, her hair disheveled, her face streaked with tears and fury. Aram was sitting silently, his head in his hands. When I stepped in, Nadia turned toward me, eyes sharp. "You're a bitter old woman who can't let go," she spat. Her words hung in the air, acidic and desperate. I looked at her, unflinching. "I already let go, Nadia. Of you both." She flinched, not from the words but from the steadiness in my voice. For years, she had feasted on my silence. But now, silence had turned its back on her. The movers arrived by noon. They carried out boxes, clothes, handbags, even that expensive chandelier she'd insisted on installing. "To modernize the place," she had said once. I stood outside, watching as neighbors peeked through their curtains. The same neighbors who had once whispered that I was too soft, too dependent, too blind. Now they watched as Nadia, dressed in arrogance and perfume, stood by the gate arguing with one of the movers. "This is my home," she shouted. "You can't do this." The mover shrugged. "Ma'am, it's not your name on the paper." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Aram stood a few feet away, silent, pale. His eyes darted toward me once, then away again. He didn't defend her. He didn't defend me either. And maybe that was the real tragedy. He was just another man caught between guilt and love, unsure which one to feed first. When the last box was loaded, Nadia turned toward me. Her expression wasn't anger anymore. It was disbelief. "You'll regret this," she said through clenched teeth. I met her gaze. I already regretted it. That's why I stopped. For a second, something flickered in her eyes, the faintest glimmer of fear. Or maybe realization. Then she got into the car, slammed the door, and drove away without looking back. As the dust settled, I felt the weight of years lift off my chest. The house, my house, stood behind me, quiet and breathing again. I stepped inside slowly. The air smelled different, lighter. The walls no longer whispered in shame. They exhaled relief. I looked around, at the photographs still hanging on the wall, the furniture worn by memories, the sunlight spilling through the cracked curtains. Didn't feel like victory. It felt like closure with a bruise. Aram lingered at the door, unsure whether to enter. "Amy," he began softly, "I don't know how to fix this." I turned to him, my voice calm. "Then maybe it's time you stop trying to fix her. And start fixing yourself." He nodded slowly, tears finally breaking free. I didn't hug him. Not yet. Some wounds needed silence before healing. Outside, the mover's truck rolled away, leaving a trail of dust and whispers. Neighbors stood in small groups, pretending not to stare. Let them talk. Let the stories spread. For once, the story was mine to tell. And as I stood at the window, watching the sun dip behind the house that was finally mine again, I felt a strange peace wash over me, the kind that comes only when pain has done its job. Still, deep down, a shadow lingered, the kind that whispers, "Peace never lasts." I never thought peace could sound this quiet. No shouting. No slamming doors. No laughter forced through gritted teeth. Just the ticking of the old wall clock and the faint hum of wind brushing through the curtains. Exactly 1 year had passed since that night, the birthday. The one that marked both my humiliation and my rebirth. And now, here I was again, sitting at the same dining table, the same candles flickering, the same cream dress draped around me. Except this time there wasn't a single stain. I had spent weeks deciding whether I wanted to celebrate at all. Would it feel like victory? Or loneliness wearing a crown? But grief and grace, I've learned, can sit together. They often do. So I baked my own cake. Simple vanilla, the way my late husband liked it, and laid the table for two. One plate for me. One for memory. The house smelled of peace, soft and strange. When the doorbell rang, I almost didn't move. I wasn't expecting anyone. But a mother's heart always knows whose silence is about to break. I opened the door and found Aram standing there, alone. His hair was unkempt. His eyes hollow with months of regret. He wasn't the proud man I once watched drift away. He looked smaller, or maybe it was just the weight of truth pressing him down. "Amy," he whispered, voice trembling. "May I come in?" For a moment I just stared at him. Time folded on itself. The little boy who once brought me wilted flowers, now a man holding a single rose. I stepped aside. "Of course." He walked in slowly, glancing around like a stranger in his own childhood home. Every corner seemed to hold a memory he'd forgotten. The living room, the faded rug, the family photos. All unchanged except him. "I didn't think you'd open the door," he said softly. "I didn't think you'd knock," I replied. He smiled faintly, the kind that trembles before it breaks. We sat down at the table. The same one where it all began. The same one where wine had once turned into a weapon. "I was blind," he whispered after a long pause. "I let her poison everything. His house. Me." His words landed heavy, but I didn't flinch. Sometimes when pain finally apologizes, it comes too late to hurt. I looked at him, not as a victim, not even as a mother, but as a woman who had finally learned to survive her own love. "People only see what they're brave enough to face," I said quietly. "You were afraid. That's all." He shook his head. "No. I was weak." "Maybe," I said. "But weakness can heal. Cruelty doesn't." He stared at the floor, twisting the stem of the rose in his fingers until a thorn pricked him. A small drop of blood bloomed against his skin. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did and thought he deserved it. "I left her," he murmured. "After the eviction. She tried to come back, but I couldn't. I couldn't live with the noise anymore." The noise. I knew what he meant. The constant criticism disguised as care. The way she turned every moment into a performance of superiority. "What happened to her?" "Yes," he sighed. "Moved to Karachi. Last I heard, she's working for some designer. Pretending nothing ever happened." "Good," I said. "Let her design other people's lives. She already ruined ours." We both laughed quietly, not with joy but with a kind of exhausted peace. Dinner was simple. I served dal rice and the cake I had baked earlier. Aram insisted on lighting the candle himself. "Make a wish, Shami," he said gently. I looked at the flame flickering between us. 1 year ago, this very light had burned against the red of spilled wine. Now it glowed clean and soft, reflected in my son's eyes. So I closed mine and whispered, "Peace." That was all I wanted now. No revenge. No validation. Just peace that stayed. After dinner, Aram stood to leave, but hesitated by the door. "Can I visit again?" he asked. "Next time," I smiled. "You'll bring the tea." He laughed, a small, hesitant sound, but it carried warmth. "I will. Every week if you'll let me." I touched his cheek gently, feeling the faint roughness of stubble, the kind that reminded me he was no longer my little boy, but still my son. "Then every week it is," I whispered. After he left, I lingered at the table, staring at the half-empty glasses. 1 year ago, I had walked away from this same room drenched in humiliation. Tonight I sat here alone but free. The cream dress I wore that night now looked new again. The same fabric that once carried the mark of someone else's cruelty now reflected candlelight, soft and unbroken. I lifted my wine glass, the same type she had used to humiliate me, and let it catch the glow of the flame. This time I poured just enough to toast the quiet. "To survival," I murmured. The first sip was warm, smooth, and gentle, nothing like that night's sharp sting. I didn't drink for revenge. I didn't drink for memory. I drank for every woman who'd ever swallowed her pride to keep her family together. And then learned that dignity doesn't live in silence. It lives in self-respect. I smiled, the kind that comes after storms. Because I finally understood. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the final form of strength. And tonight, forgiveness wasn't for Aram. It was for me. I stood up, blowing out the candles one by one. Each small flicker dying felt like closing a wound. As I turned to leave the room, my eyes caught the faint reflection of myself in the mirror across the table. Same woman, same dress. But everything else changed. My husband's photo hung above the mantel. His eyes gentle as always. I whispered toward him, "I think you'd be proud of me, Rahim." The wind brushed the curtains softly, as if in reply. Before going to bed, I cleaned the table, the habit of a lifetime. But when I picked up the wine glass, a small drop slipped onto the white linen. For a heartbeat, my stomach tightened, that old panic flashing through me. But then I looked closer. It was just water catching the candlelight. I laughed quietly. "False alarm," I whispered to myself. Then with a small cloth I wiped it clean. Effortlessly. I turned off the lights, letting the moonlight fill the room. The air was cool and the night outside was calm. As I climbed into bed, I felt no ache, no anger, no bitterness. Just the deep, quiet relief of having survived myself. I thought of all the stains I'd carried, the ones on my dress, my pride, my heart, and how time had washed each one away, leaving behind only the woman I had always been, underneath it all. I smiled into the dark, my final thought soft as a prayer. This time the stain was gone, inside and out.